Nigel.
Thanks very much, Tim. Very conscious that I'm tail-end Charlie. You've been a very attentive audience, so I'll be as succinct as I can. Fascinating, though, to hear about the technology and how we can improve our mining processes around the world, not just in the Central Asian region. Standard disclaimer there. So where do we operate? We operate in 2 countries. I'll focus on the Kazakhstan operation this morning, obviously for this conference. That's where we first started out over 10 years ago now. In fact, we celebrated earlier this year 10 years in production at our Kounrad operation. What is Kounrad? It's an in-situ dump leach SXEW processing facility. SXEW stands for solvent extraction electro-winning facility. As I say, we've been in production now for over 10 years, and the life of mine is out to 2034. We operate right in the middle of Kazakhstan, just north of Lake Balkhash, which you'll have seen on various other slides this morning. Production last year was 14,041 tonnes of copper, and our guidance this year is for a similar kind of amount, between 13,500 to 14,000 tonnes of copper. I think it's fair to say on the back of the success at Kounrad, just over 5 years ago, we spent $400 million acquiring an underground zinc and lead mine in North Macedonia, which is in the Balkans region. I won't spend too much time this morning talking about that operation, but it had similar characteristics: low cost and a well-managed operation with a good track record, and that's why we invested in it. Very different country, North Macedonia, to mine at Sasa and to improve best practices at Sasa from what we acquired 5 years ago. And you can see our guidance, our production, should I say, for the first 9 months of this year. 10,685 tonnes of copper, 16,000 tonnes of zinc and 20,000 tonnes, nearly 21,000 tonnes of lead, on track for our guidance of this year. And as I said before, we celebrated 10 years of production, which we're really proud of in early April this year. We've now had 5 years of ownership of Sasa. So there's just a few overviews and statistics. Why do I put this slide up? Purpose-driven approach. I think it's important. You've heard all the speakers this morning talking about sustainability, ESG. We believe this gives us a real purpose in terms of what we're doing. And our purpose is on the left-hand side of the slide there. You can see to produce base metals, so that's not just copper, zinc and lead, but we'll look at other metals, which are essential for modern living profitably in a safe and sustainable environment for all of our stakeholders, not just the shareholders, but all of the stakeholders, which you can see at the right-hand side. And we have stakeholders, obviously, government, employees, communities, employees, etc. And what we use that for is to focus on what our values are: health and safety, sustainability, efficiency and innovation, which is why I said it was good to hear about the innovation going on from Andrew and Nick, and respect and trust throughout the workforce that we've got. We've got over 1,000 employees now across the group. And our immediate strategic objectives, things we focus our annual KPIs on and how management get remunerated, is on 3 key areas there: focusing on sustainability, low cost, high margin operations, and ensuring that the money we make from those operations we give back appropriately and reinvest back into the business. And sustainability, there's been a lot of focus on this in the last 2 to 3 years, and we're no different from any other mining company or business in any sector for that matter. And we've defined 5 key pillars for our sustainability: delivering value through stewardship, maintaining health and safety, focusing on people and their development within the business, caring for the local environment, and unlocking value for our communities. And again, I'll touch on a little bit more of that in a minute. Moving swiftly along to this slide, sustainability I mentioned. What we've done is we've actually put specific targets. It can be quite difficult sometimes setting a KPI or a target for ESG-driven initiatives. But as you can see there, we've got on the stewardship side, 0 human rights abuses, health and safety. We target 0 fatalities, obviously, but also improving our what's known as lost time injury frequency rate. That's how many incidents you have every million man-hours worked. We look at trying to improve that year on year. We focus on our people. We have very strong numbers in terms of the locally employed people, and it's maintaining 99% local employment across the group. And then diversity targets as well thrown in. Environment targets, really important that we put some substantiation on those targets, I think. So we've committed to a 50% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and to be net zero by 2050. A 75% reduction in surface water abstraction at Sasa by the end of 2026, all as a consequence of the transition to cut and fill mining that we're doing at Sasa. And 70% of our tailings to be stored in a more environmentally friendly manner than a traditional wet dam and tailings facility. Again, a lot of that is driven by the cut and fill mining transition at Sasa. Reporting to Scope 3 emissions in 2024, that's important. There's a big focus from our investor base on how we report our emissions, etc. And then global industry standards, as many of you in this room will know, How you manage your waste at a mine is critical in these days. It should always have been, but it has become far more of a focus. And the global industry standards on tailings management, we've committed to adhering to that by 2024. And then finally, but certainly by no means least, we spend a lot of time and effort and money on our local communities. We've historically always been good in this area, spending about 0.25% of our revenue on the local communities. We have a legal charitable foundation both at Sasa and Kounrad, and we're going to increase that next year to an average of 0.5% of our group revenue. So this is our main operation, Kounrad. People at Sasa wouldn't like me saying that, I guess, but this is our starting operation at Kounrad. And what is it? I've got a bit of open pit envy this morning listening to Evgeny and the Matanda deposit, which is slightly bigger than this, I have to say, but this is a huge hole in the ground. Now, we don't operate that hole in the ground, we don't do open pit mining, but historically from the mid-1930s, Kazakhstan and the country have operated that mine and generated about 3 million tonnes of copper. And what we do in the waste dumps that you can see both to the east and the southwest, we process that ore that at the time could not be processed, either because the technology wasn't available or it's too low grade. So we operate very low grade dumps here, around 0.1, 0.12%. But out of it, by doing in situ, and I emphasise in situ, we do not move any of this ore at all. We do it in situ, we put highly diluted sulfuric acid onto in little dripper pipes, and that, by going through the dumps themselves, creates what we call pregnant leach solution, which is small amounts of copper in a solution that we put through a traditional SXEW plant, which generates around about 30% of the world's copper. That kind of technology, so it's not new technology, SXEW. We use that, we bundle it up, we put it on a truck, and it gets sent out to our customers. So it's quite a simple operation in that sense, but a lot of science and thought has gone into it. And we estimate at the moment we've got about 119,000 tonnes of recoverable copper. You don't recover all the copper, and I'll come on to that on this in a couple of slides actually, in terms of how much copper we estimate on those dumps. I've mentioned the celebration of 10 years at Kounrad. Just some statistics for you there. We have paid $208.5 million of tax to the local government, to the government in Kazakhstan. We generated nearly $882 million of revenue and created an EBITDA in that 10-year period of $645.1 million. Generated a lot of employment. We employ around about 323 people and 86 contractors. As I said before, we invest money back into the local community, which is the right thing to do, and all good mining companies will do that. Mentioned before about the recoverability of copper, so 119,000 tonnes of recoverable copper, but the chart you see at the bottom there, the leach curve, shows that we estimate, depending on where the dump is, that we'll recover anywhere between 35% and 50% of the copper within that ore body, or that dump, should I say, effectively, and over a long period of time. So in the east, we hazard a guess at around about 9 to 10 months, and that's where we've primarily been operating over the past 10 years. And you know, our planning has borne that out, that it's about a 9 to 10 month leach curve, whereas in the west it's closer to 20, 22 months. And some statistics, as I say there, on the left-hand side about the actual performance of the east and west dumps. It is a very low-cost operation, and that's because we don't move the ore. You can see there the costs. In the first half of this year, we had costs of around about $9.2 million. Yes, we're experiencing inflation. I think everybody around the world is experiencing that, both on payroll, less so on electricity because of the unique factors, and I'll touch on that in Kazakhstan at the moment. But we have had an increase. But you can see there, our unit cash cost, C1 cash cost, we announced for the first half of this year was 63 cents per pound. That's about $1,500, sorry, slightly less than that, maybe $1,400 per tonne. And copper, even though it's slightly subdued at the moment in price, is still selling close to $8,000 per tonne. So we report an EBITDA margin at Kounrad around about 79%. Last slide on Kounrad, conscious of time. We are investing in a solar plant at Kounrad. You may say why, because I have to say electricity is quite cheap internationally in Kazakhstan because it's primarily coal-fired or coal-based, but it's to enhance our green credentials effectively. We think this is something that will increase in Kazakhstan in terms of the investment into renewable energy, even though there is an abundance of coal, and we're doing our bit here. And so we've invested, or we will be investing, we're starting, we should complete construction next year, close to $5 million on a plant which has got an output of only 4.77 megawatts. It's not a huge solar farm, but it's a contribution. It'll contribute about 16 to 18% of our electrical requirements through the SXEW plant itself. So it's a project where the board's extremely keen on doing and learning how we can use that technology, possibly at Sasa as well. Coming on to Sasa very quickly, this is in the Balkan area, as I said. It's an underground lead and zinc mine, so I won't labour the point too much. It's a good operation. We've got guidance this year of 20 to 22,000 tonnes of zinc, 27 to 29,000 tonnes of lead. And I suppose the key point really on Sasa is that we're transitioning from a method of mining which was known as sub-level caving to a method now known as cut and fill. It's a bulk method of mining, and there's three elements to it effectively. In that bottom aerial photograph you can see it's on quite a constrained valley at about 1,000 metres up above sea level. It's Sasa. It's in a beautiful area in terms of the trees and the whole area itself. And as you work your way up the valley there, the actual plant itself is on the left hand side, and the three key aspects is to build a new decline far larger than the current underground holes that we have at the Sasa. So instead of 3.5 metres by 3.5 metres, it's closer to 4.5 metres by 4.5 metres. Doesn't sound a lot, but it's a significantly larger size decline to actually access the ore body in future years. That's part of it. We're well advanced on that. We're building a paste backfill plant, again well advanced on that, and that will be completed in the first half of next year. And all the pipe work to take the paste down underground, and then dry stack tailings. And the combination of those two elements at the end there, that will mean that we hit that target of 70% being stored in a more environmentally friendly way, and therefore the tailings facility, which you can just see down there on the right hand side, about 2/3 of the way on from the left hand side of the aerial photograph, but that will be able to be used right through to the end of life at Sasa, which is 2037. So those are the operations. How do we use the money that we generate from those operations? I think we've always been quite good as a company on our capital allocation discipline. We always have been paying returns back to shareholders. We announced for the first half of this year a record interim dividend of 10 pence. That was 40% of those free cash flow numbers, the number I mentioned earlier, which was $52 million for the first 6 months. And we have a policy whereby we pay back, out of that free cash flow that we generate from the operations, 30 to 50% of it back to our shareholders. And so far, since we first started paying dividends in 2012 now, we've paid back $277 million to our shareholders, or 142 pence a share. We paid off all the debt, as I said before. That was over 5 years, religiously paying back $38 million until we finished off the payments in August. So we don't have any debt on the balance sheet now. We have a strong balance sheet. And then the other aspect of it is delivering growth. That's why we're here today. Myself, Louise and Gavin are here from the executive team to talk to people, because we are keen to invest in Kazakhstan, the Central Asian region. We believe there's still lots of opportunities. We believe it's a good area to invest in. Yes, it's been through a difficult year, as Ben quite eloquently talked about earlier on in the day. But we still think there's a lot of opportunities in Kazakhstan, and we're keen to expand our portfolio in that area. I've just put down some of the things. It is hard growing a mining company. There's a lot of factors you have to take into consideration. And actually those factors have become even more significant with sustainability. We now need to think about water usage, tailing storage, energy usage, lots of factors, as well as where you're going to invest and how they got the workforce and what's the stage of development, etc. So it's not easy, but we are confident that we can hopefully find something in Kazakhstan to expand the business. So that's Central Asia Metals PLC. That's our Kounrad operation. Great area to invest in, we believe. We're big supporters of Kazakhstan and that area in general. I won't again labour this point because I'm conscious of time, but we do have a strong, sustainable business. We have got strong capital allocation priorities, giving money back to all of our shareholders and stakeholders. And the 2022 outlook for us is positive. We're close to the year end now. We are on track to meet our guidance for the year. We are suffering, as everybody in the world, is cost inflation. It's how we manage that cost increase whilst enjoying the benefits of fairly elevated metal prices, given where the world is. And the final point, we are building a solar power plant in Kazakhstan, and we'll be contributing to the green revolution in that sense, I suppose, in our own small way. And on that note, I'll hand it back to Tim, or for any questions, or we are staying around for lunch, so anybody wants to ask any questions, please feel free.
Thanks, Nigel.